Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Well, we're talking sales, we're talking selling. We've had hundreds of episodes, but you know what we haven't talked about, I don't think ever, is the science of pricing. And when you tell a sales professional, you tell a professional services firm owner, you tell any entrepreneur, hey, let's talk about pricing, their face starts to melt and it's like, oh, it's so complicated. It's so scary. I'm not making enough money, but I hate negotiating and I have the man with the solution, Mr. Brian Doyle. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
So you are, in fact, your entire firm, Holden Advisors, are pricing experts, pricing consultants, pricing mentors to a wide variety of companies, large and small. I'm curious, how did you come to the work that you're doing today? And then what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
So it was a windy road for me. Started my professional career as an Air Force pilot, flew the C-17 for 10 years of active duty, including some combat missions in Kosovo, flying the presidential motorcade around the world. So it was a fantastic experience. Went from there to General Electric and was a Six Sigma master black belt process improvement guy. And what I found was that while that was fantastic, what I really wanted to do was move towards the front end of the business because I felt like I could have a greater impact if I was in sales and marketing. So moved within GE into sales and marketing roles, worked for a couple of smaller companies, and then I found Holden Advisors. And what attracted me was I read a book by our founder called Negotiating with Backbone. And I saw myself in those selling scenarios. I saw where I had done the right things. I saw where I had screwed things up. And I was like, this applies, because really what I was tired of was going into a deal, thinking I was negotiating correctly, and either losing the deal or winning the deal at a price that I was not comfortable with. And then I had this sort of seller's remorse aspect of it. And when I saw that laid out and how to overcome that, I said, this is the space I want to play in, because I want to help folks, set the right price and then in turn go get the right price.
Wow. So much to unpack there. I'm guessing, is most of the work that you do around services, and again, it could be large industrial kinds of things, clearly mostly B2B, or is it also products?
It's both. We are largely industry agnostic. On the far industrial side of things, we have a client who sells food ingredients. So picture selling salt to McDonald's by the trainload. And if you could get an extra penny out of each pound, what that might mean. So as commoditized as that, all the way through software as a service, professional services, financial services, where it's, not necessarily a product, but, all the way through different services. And the way we think about things and really understanding the value that our clients provide their customers, it works across those industries.
Yeah. And I know that on the Holden Advisors website, you break this down very clearly, that there's a assess phase, there's a pricing and pricing strategy phase, and then there's a selling and negotiating phase. So even before we get into all of that wonderfulness, I made mention in the intro that pricing is pricing is scary. Yeah. Pricing is a hot topic. Pricing is like part art, part science, part witchcraft. What is so tricky about pricing, and why do so many companies of all sizes tend to screw it up?
I think number one is they're afraid of losing customers. And I think number two is that they really don't understand the value that they provide to those customers. And so That's why we start with that assessment phase, is to like, hey, you may be pricing appropriately. Gosh, you may be overcharging. Who knows? Now, more often than not, if somebody's talking to us, they feel like they're leaving money on the table, but we don't know. So we're going to go in there. We're going to talk to, look at internal sources. So talking to people, interviews, looking at the transactional data, and then go talk to customers and find out really what is it that you provide that helps your customers do what they do better. And really, for us, it falls into three buckets. Do you help them increase their revenue? Do you help them reduce their costs? And/or do you help them minimize their risk? And it typically falls in one of those three buckets. And so folks they don't think in those terms. And then they say, if I raise my price, what are the implications going to be? And sometimes if you're talking to a pricing professional, they say, oh, this is going to be great. I can show you in the spreadsheet. If I raise my price 20%, it's going to flow right to the bottom line. It's going to be huge for profitability. If you talk to a sales leader, they're going to say, you're killing me. I'm going to lose all my customers. That's why we connect those dots, because we started as a pricing boutique and we did value-based pricing and it worked and people appreciated it. But what we found was that we really needed to solve that second problem, which was making sure that the sales teams had the skills and the confidence to go talk about that price, build the relationships with their customers, and go get that appropriate payment for the value they're providing.
From a sales training perspective, I'm wondering, as far as the sales leader is concerned, like, oh, we're going to lose all of our customers, we're going to lose all our accounts, we're going to get killed on price, and no one's going to buy from us. Sometimes, I'm sure you've come across this situation where they say, the problem is, Brian, that our clients won't pay that. And you might stop and say, well, we've talked to your clients and we've come to the conclusion that you need better clients or you need different clients. You need to play in a different market where the cost and the risk and the gain, the equation is different in this market with this type of customer than the type of customer you've been focusing on. So basically, when a sales leader complains to you and says, hey, Brian, I don't think our customers would pay more, you might come back and say, you're right. You need better customers.
Right. It could be that. And it could be they're really leading you down the path that they will not pay more. And so we believe that there are four distinct buyer types, and three of them you're probably super familiar with. There's price buyers. I, no kidding, want to pay the lower price, not playing any games. I got this much budget. That's it. There's value buyers, folks who will switch for the different value they perceive. There's a lot of expertise probably in your area from a value buyer. There's relationship buyers who want you to hold their hand through the process and, just sort of take care of me. Maybe I won't put this out to bid. I found a good person that's going to do me right. So those are three that we've seen, through our careers. We believe there's a fourth one that we call the poker player. And that is a value or relationship buyer who is pretending to be a price buyer. And so when sellers say to us, our customers will not pay that amount, they could be price buyers. Now, our research has shown that there's no more than 20 to 30% of all buyers are price buyers. The rest are somebody else. And we've got a list of about the top 10 techniques that sourcing, procurement, buyers, whatever you want to call them, use to devalue what the seller is selling and say, I'm not going to pay anything more. And when we see those, we call them a poker player, when we see those tells like a poker player would have, we say, aha, this is a different sort of game. They probably are willing to pay your higher price. Here's how to navigate that.
We interrupt this interview with an important announcement. If you're committed to better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees, get over to doitselling.com right now and grab a copy of my new book. That's the deal, kids. Grab a copy of the new book and then get all the bonuses, companion tools, trainings, and downloads at doitselling.com. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. That's how it works. I'll see you over there.
I also know that some of your clients and a significant part of the seller community out there, when they're hit with price objections over and over and over, and they're kind of conditioned, we always get beat up on price. The response is discounting. So now we start to get addicted to this concept of discounting, negotiating against ourselves, essentially. How do you help sellers break that discounting reflex?
And you're exactly right. I was the same way. I would much rather close a deal at 80% of list price for, totally easily close it than to try to close it at 100%. So I get why salespeople think that way. One of the tools that we use is called give gets. And so when you're dealing with a buyer who says, I can't pay that price, we teach, fair enough, David, I'd be happy to lower the price. And here's how we'll do that. We're going to strip away these two pieces of value. You won't have a dedicated account manager. You won't be able to private label our product. Your payment terms are different. Whatever it is, we can strip that away. We'll lower the price. How's that sound? And if they are in fact a price buyer, they will say, thank you, I needed a lower price. And in all other circumstances, they will say, wait a minute, we want the higher value. In doing that, using the give gets, we've now changed the conversation from price to value. And then we can go start talking about, well, you just told me this was super important. Why wouldn't you pay for it?
Now, sometimes I'm sure you come across clients where they say, Brian, the thing that we sell is the thing that we sell. There's no plus, there's no minus, there's no, currently we sell the thing and the price range that we like to sell it at is between A and B. You recommend that they either productize their service or add a service to a product or add some set dressing, some of which could be very, very valuable, but add some additional components so that they have some flexibility of things to add or things to take away, correct?
Exactly. So I gave you the example of selling salt to McDonald's.
Yeah.
I'll take it one more commodity level lower. We had a client who sold dirt, just dirt from a quarry to take to building sites. I mean, you can't get more commoditized than that. And they were third in their market and they were losing some market share and they were about to go out of business. We talked to their customers and their customers told us, yeah, the worst part of this whole process is I have my dump trucks sitting in line waiting to get filled with dirt. And so to make the long story short, what they ended up doing was developing an express line, sort of a TSA pre-check that people were willing to pay for. And they said, look, if you want to wait in line, it's this price. If you want to get through this faster, it's that price. They did the math to quantify that value and essentially sort of split the value of you get trucks through here faster. They're not idling. They're at the work site faster. The driver's done. You're paying the driver less and so on. And that's where their market expanded because they had these two elements and they could go from good to better, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. If you can help value-based pricing around dirt, you can probably improve pricing for anything in any industry, and that's fantastic. Let me go back to what first kind of hooked your interest, which is this concept of backbone. You mentioned negotiating with backbone. I know the firm now has a whole kind of sales training, selling with backbone, negotiating with backbone. Break down that concept of backbone and sort of how we implement that at every stage of the sales process, early, middle, and end.
And it's a great comment, David, because it does matter that you start early. What our research has shown is that buyers are far more interested in talking about value earlier in the sales cycle, discovery, qualify. And if you wait to talk about it when you're proposing or negotiating, they're way less interested. And sometimes it's even different people, like procurement has taken over the process. So we have to start thinking about the value that we provide. We need to start having those conversations with our customers. Maybe it's part of a quarterly business review. Maybe it's regularly scheduled meetings, whatever it is. We start to have those conversations, and we try to keep it as simple as possible. Every salesperson has, at one time or another, dealt with an ROI calculator that is so complex they don't even want to touch it. We need to be talking in terms that can be done on, say, the back of a cocktail napkin. And we say, hey, it seems like if we do this and this, you guys make, you sell 1 million more units. And even if the customer pushes back and they say it's not 1 million, it's 500,000, the numbers are always really big. And so you say, okay, well, gosh, how much money do you make on 500,000 units? Oh, that's $10 million, whatever it is. And so you start those conversations early, and the value is a little bit more quantified and established. Then when you get into the real negotiation and perhaps procurement has taken over, now there are those tells that I referred to before that procurement is going to bring. They're going to say, you're a commodity. They're going to say, there's somebody, your competitor down the street is 30% less. And the number is often 30%. There's a reason behind that. They're going to say, here's this bundle of things that you have. I just want the lower price for this thing and for that thing. They're going to try to break that bundle apart. They're going to ghost you. They're going to yell at you. They're going to say, David, I'm really disappointed in this proposal. I thought we were partners. And I just, and that people-oriented salesperson they're going to take that personally. Then it's like, okay, what techniques do we use? And we've got a variety of techniques. Give-get certainly is one of those tools. But how to respond, not react, respond to those techniques and to be patient. That's sort of how that flows through the sales cycle and gets people to the outcome they're looking for.
This brings up another big question, which is that handoff between your executive buyer, your economic buyer, and then we're going to send this to procurement. We're going to send this to legal. We're going to send this to purchasing. Wherever good deals go to die,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
They send it. And you're having this wonderful value-based conversation with the executive who's got the budget, the authority, the need, the timing, everything is perfect. And then please see Sally in procurement and, she'll take care of the rest from here. Deal implodes.
Yeah.
What can we do in that transition, either before the handoff, I'm guessing before is probably better than after, to make sure that the deal and the value and the criteria and the impact of what we're selling to that executive doesn't get, chopped up in the chopping mill known as procurement?
So first off, you said it. You not only have to build that relationship with the decision maker, you have to maintain it. So even though procurement says, nah, don't talk to those people anymore, you talk to me, you still back channel or front channel those conversations and you let them know what's going on. I will share a story of this exact scenario. It's worked out. Procurement comes in, somebody down the street's 30% less. I won't make you do 30%, but I need a discount of 20%, which by the way is their target. Well, I need different payment terms. I need you to give me a little extra, whatever. And so our client said, did the give-gets. I can give you the lower price. Here are the things I'm going to remove. And the procurement person said, good. And so then they hung up the phone. They immediately called their executive sponsor and said, I want you to know what just happened. They asked me for a discount. Here's what we did. You will be losing these two things of value. And, I guess that's the deal you wanted. They said, give me a minute. Hung up the phone. 5 minutes later, called them back. Yeah, we're at the regular price and we're going to get everything that you originally sold us. Thank you. Sorry for the hassle. But that's the reason we use the term backbone. It does take strength to be able to stand up for that. Sometimes it's silence. To just the person offers something and you sit there for 5 seconds and think about the vacation you're going to take. And you come back on the line and say, here's what we can do. It is a patience game, which is difficult for sellers who have a quota. Wow, this is going to get through the end of June. I'm not going to make my goal for the half. You got to believe, you got to stand up for it. And one of the places we often start is with an executive workshop, because the seller could be doing all the right things, but if their executive team rolls in and says, "Where's my number? You haven't hit your June number," well, then it all falls apart. And so I like to start there and say, we got to get on the same page before we train your salespeople.
Yeah, get the executive buy-in.
That's right.
Let me go back to that scenario that you just said about hang up the phone with purchasing, call your executive buyer. Let me tell you what just happened. I think a lot of folks listening do not know how procurement professionals and purchasing professionals are evaluated and perhaps compensated. So you said they're always after a 20% discount. Walk us through just knowing what you know about the whole procurement machine inside most of these large organizations. They're sort of doing their job, and we sort of have to do our job as professional sellers with backbone. But what is their side of the equation? Why do they have to beat us up? And are they evaluated for trying, which they almost always do, or are they evaluated on succeeding as well?
It's succeeding. As you might guess, just like a salesperson, right? It's not like, hey, I tried really hard, I didn't close any deals. You don't keep your job with that performance. So procurement is the same way. So they are hired to make sure that these godless salespeople are not taking advantage of their company. So, has the salesperson inflated the price? And knowing that maybe they'll discount down and then get what essentially is full price. Are they blaming, in the last couple of years, are they blaming inflation for a price increase when in fact their materials have not really gone up that high in price? So they are afraid that their company is being disadvantaged. They're being taken advantage of by the seller. Their job is to extract the discount. They are measured by those discounts. And so at the end of the year, it is like, okay, how much money did you save this company? They also have to make sure that the supplier is giving them what they need to fulfill all the requirements of whatever that product and service is supposed to fulfill. And so they have and feel a tremendous obligation to do the right thing for their company and not be taken advantage of. And so they have a playbook, just like there are plenty of books written to help salespeople. There are books written to help procurement people. They have their own podcast, David. I listen to them. That's how part of how I know the techniques. They talk about them on their podcasts. They have all their training. And their training has said, use these techniques to extract discounts from sellers. Unfortunately, what has happened is sometimes the salespeople are almost training procurement people. So when a seller says, my product costs $100, and we get to December 15th, and my quote is about coming due, and they say, I'll give it to you for 80. Procurement people are not dummies. They say, oh, it's the end of the year. This guy's going to discount. Okay, he must have been overcharging me in the first place. So it just bolsters them to continue using these techniques. Sometimes we're teaching them to do that.
Totally. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
As far as the closing, would you agree that deals that don't close, or deals where we feel, we were perfectly positioned, everything was great until the very end, that's usually not a closing problem, that the problem probably happened earlier on in the sales process and we just missed it. We didn't listen carefully enough. We didn't ask enough penetrating questions. We didn't uncover the reason behind the reason or the issue behind the issue. How are you diagnosing when a sales leader comes to you and says, hey, Brian, our closing ratio in the last 6 months, it's just taken such a hit. it's probably not closing techniques. It's probably things that came before. Talk about that for a moment.
It's a common problem. And what we often do is we will sit down with sellers from a sales team and understand, okay, so what are you using for discovery? How are you qualifying? How are you talking about your value? How are you quantifying your value? How are you listening to your customers and so on? All of those things that good salespeople do. Most of the time, we will be finding holes where we say, oh, okay, so you're not talking about the value in terms of, income and revenue and cost reduction and risk. You're talking in terms of features and benefits. You're not talking in the customer's terms. You're talking in your own terms. That's a very common problem. And sort of the sister problem along with that is you're selling into the wrong level. And what we find is that when you're talking about those sorts of metrics of value that I was just referring to, those are KPIs that senior leaders care about. And so you have more conversations with senior leaders. If you're talking about the bells and the whistles of your product, you can talk about that all day with a middle manager who doesn't control the budget. The real hard one is when that middle manager is willing to spend hour after hour with you, feeding you information. And you're like, oh man, I got this nailed. I got a great relationship. Not with the decision maker. And that's how, I talked about the 4 buyer types that we have. We think about those 4 buyer types in 2 selling situations. So 8 selling scenarios total. And the 2 are, do you have a relationship, a business relationship with a decision maker, or do you not? It's not, do you go to lunch with them? Do you play golf with them? Whatever. Are you talking about real business problems with them or not? And if you're not, you're in a completely different category.
Let me ask you, because you said something that people really need to re-listen, rewind the podcast, folks. Listen to what Brian said in the last 3 minutes. Value-based questions. If your prospect does not know the answer to these critical business KPIs around revenue, cost, risk, you're asking all the right questions because you've followed Brian and his advice. And they're like, yeah, David, I really don't know. Yeah, David, it's a great question. I'm really not sure. Yeah, David, it's tough to put a number on it. The executive that owns the problem will always know that math. It's the lower level people where it's trying to nail Jello to a tree, right? They just think, it's higher than we would like. How much higher? I don't know. So how can people, if they're in a situation like this, which hopefully increasingly will be less and less, is there a way to navigate up? Is there a way to take that mid-level or even mid to senior level person and say, that's not really my thing. That's my boss, or that's the CEO, or that's up to the board, or that's up to some higher power. Can we navigate up, or have we kind of screwed up that deal and just need to move on?
Not necessarily. So choice number 1 is to start high and move down the chain of command instead of up, but recognize that you can't always do that. The second thing is to say, hey, so why don't we get a meeting, you, me, and your boss, and we can answer some of these questions, because that's how I'm going to fulfill on this thing that you really need, is to have that senior person in the room too. That is also a technique when you're talking with procurement. And they say, no, you don't get to talk to anybody else. You ask these questions. They don't answer the questions, or they can't. So either let's set up an appointment with the more senior person, or you go back and set up an appointment with the senior person. And if procurement says, I told you not to talk to them, say, oh my gosh, well, you couldn't answer my questions. So I had to go back to my original point of contact because I knew that she could. That's what I needed to do. So it's sort of, get you off the hook a little bit. The other technique that you can use is, what is keeping you, talking to your middle manager, what is keeping you from having that conversation with your boss or your stakeholder? What's keeping you from getting time with these guys? Oh, well, they're focused on this other thing that I didn't know about. Oh, they're worried about this something. And what we can do in those circumstances is we can feed information into our middle manager contact to make them look like a hero to their boss and get that meeting. So it's not just, hey, would you meet with my vendor? He's sort of insisting. That doesn't go too far.
Yeah.
But if they say, hey, I learned these things about our industry because my vendor spends all his time in there, and I really think you should meet with him. Plus, he's got questions I don't know how to answer. Can we do that? That's a sort of different conversation. Somebody makes a half an hour for that.
Well, this also brings up, of course, the whole concept of initial prospecting, right? Do you want to talk to a vendor? It's like, no.
Yeah.
I think there was some research, and I forget which company did the research. And again, maybe your firm has some specific research on this. Why will executive decision makers spend time with a salesperson? I believe in this survey, this was like 10 years ago. Number one answer, to learn something new. Number two, to find out what their competitors are doing. Number three, to catch up on some industry trends or some forces that might be impacting their company. So as far as a door opening strategy, do you think that folks are in that vendor position, or are they more moving to, or should they more move to that expert / thought leader position where we're educating that prospect in that initial discovery meeting? We're providing actual value or insight or research or data or trends that will help that person, whether they buy from us or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the right way to go, is to start supplying, essentially free information. It can be things like posting on LinkedIn. It can be something our company does is a video roundtable where we have a couple of our pricing group and a client, and we talk about current events. It's publishing papers, and everybody likes benchmarking.
Yeah.
So you can share the stories. And the best thing that I hear in a prospecting call from a prospective client is when they say, damn, it's like you work here.
Yeah.
And we all every customer likes to think that they are a snowflake and completely unique. Many of them are not.
Yeah.
And so your experience as a salesperson, having heard various things in your industry, you can come to them and say, this is what I'm hearing. It doesn't have to be a sanctioned study that interviewed 10,000 people. It can be what you've heard, and you're bringing it to them. And it's like when I talk about those procurement techniques, their faces light up. They're like, I was talking to one client who said, I think I had 6 of those on one call yesterday. Like they just went from one to the other down the playbook. And when you see them light up and they say like, oh my God, it's like you work here, then you know that you are in and having the conversation that will lead to potentially bigger and better things, not can I get 5 minutes to convince you that I'm better than everybody else?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we're landing the plane here, Brian, final question. Let's talk about the kinds of questions that we should be asking to have a value-based pricing conversation around those 3 factors that you identified: impact on revenue, impact on cost, impact on risk. What does that dialogue sound like, or what do you teach folks? And again, we don't have time to go into the whole spectrum of things that are in all of your fantastic workshops, but just to get our brains thinking on a different frequency, because value to one prospect might live in a different spot than value to another. They're all going to be in those 3 buckets, but one might care much more about revenue, and one might care much more about cost reduction, and a third one might care a lot more about risk reduction. What kinds of questions do we ask to surface and kind of get the pulse of where they're at?
So a great place to start understanding what questions to ask are earnings reports, letters from the president, figuring out what they're saying, what their KPIs are. And if you don't know the KPIs, you ask the KPIs. So everything's going to be funneling up to that. So you start with big questions like that, and you're asking questions that are informed. So, David, as you know, 10 or 15 years ago, the big question used to be, what keeps you up at night? My point of view is that that's long past. What we start with is, here's what should be keeping you up at night. How do you think about this?
Yeah.
And if they've never thought of it, that's that, expert information you just gave them. And if they have thought about it, now it's that open-ended question that can go a variety of different places to understand what's important to them. And then you start asking questions about, what happens if you don't do that? So it's not how much would you like to buy or how fast do you have to have it delivered? It's questions like, what would happen if you didn't deliver on time? What are your customers asking for in your product?
Yeah.
Those sort of a little bit more open-ended questions where they go either A, I don't know, or, oh, yeah, that's a good question. We just got all this feedback from our voice of customer and ...
Yeah.
So you're learning these things so that now you're going to tailor your solution to them. And to your point, if I'm talking to operations, it's probably cost reduction. If I'm talking to some sales leader, it's probably revenue generation. So I can tailor those things from the get-go. But I'm learning these things where I can tailor my proposal to what they really need, not my features and benefits.
Yes. I talk about that in a slightly different way. I talk about you have to have the conversation in the currency of your client. So if the currency is revenue growth, we're framing everything around revenue growth. We're not bothering to talk about cost reduction, risk reduction. So whatever's important to them, that's what leads the conversation to its conclusion.
Right. And at its simplest form, how do they make money?
Yeah.
What do they do to make money?
Yeah.
Are you supporting that?
Yeah.
Or are you selling them something that's like, number 20 on the list?
And I also love what you said just about a moment ago about you have to also keep in mind your customer's customer or your client's client, right? What are they being evaluated on? What do their customers want more of or less of from them? And how can what you're selling support that, accelerate that, and move them forward in their business in front of their ultimate end customer?
Exactly. Yeah. We have a client who sells parts for tractors, and then there are farmers buying those tractors. So they're not selling to farmers, but what the farmer cares about and is important to them is a huge difference in that supply chain.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I know that people are going to want to get connected and stay connected to more Brian Doyle brilliance. Where can we send people? What resources, links in the show notes? How can folks connect with you?
So a great place to get more information and to connect with me is our website, Holden Advisors. Lots of papers, lots of podcasts, lots of information out there that you can research on your own. And then if you want to speak to me directly, please do. Just reach out on LinkedIn. You could just search on Brian Doyle at Holden Advisors, and there's only one of us.
Excellent. Well, Brian Doyle, thank you for sharing so many value bombs in this interview. I hugely appreciate you. Thanks for spending time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.